Water has catapulted the Poland Spring Resort into legend. Today we will not only learn about the legend, but the backstory. Cindy Robbins, they say, came for a summer and stayed for a lifetime. For Laura Brown, Poland Spring is her lifetime. These two ladies share a passion for this place and its history, and I, for one, am amazed at how far and wide their story goes. Please welcome Cindy Robbins and Laura Brown.
So thank you all for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces tonight. How many of you have some connection to Poland Spring? Yeah, I thought so. What? Good. Well, tell you the secret. My water comes from Auburn. You see that big tower? That's filled with Auburn water now. Source water's too expensive. So I want to tell you a little bit about Laura. This is probably the first time she spoke to this many people this long. So she's going to be reading. I'm going to be doing it by memory. So she'll probably tell you more of the truth than I will. But Laura started working in the Maine State Building because her grandmother was a docent there and the administrative assistant, her grandmother. And her mother, I think, would dump her there. Yes? Yes. With her grandmother. She started giving tours
when I was 13.
So she's been giving tours at the Maine State Building a long time. She's now 26. So. I started working there, as she told you, when I was 16. I came up there to get a job. My parents had a camp on Middle Rank Pond. We lived in Lewiston. And they just thought that would be a perfect place for me to go raise money to go to college. And I'm still there 48 years later. So Laura and I are going to kind of split the presentation. We can't see that. We can only see the computer. So if we're talking about something that we're not supposed to be talking about, raise your hand because it means that it didn't move like we thought it moved. Okay, so I'm going to assume you know nothing. Just because some people know a lot more than others, obviously, about Poland Spring. But there's two people in the audience that probably know a little bit about the beginning. The hill that we sit on was part of the Shaker Village, the Poland Shaker Village. And Shakers also own a village in Alfred, Maine. And in Alfred, Maine, they were next door neighbors to the Rickers. And the Rickers had a sawmill and they had rights to the water. And the Shakers really wanted that sawmill. And so they tried to convince the Rickers to give up the land and become Shakers and live in the communal life, and which also, most of you probably know, that means giving up sex. And Hiram Ricker had 10 children. He didn't want to have anything to do with that. But he did negotiate with them, and he agreed that if you give me something of equal value, I will give you the sawmill. And the negotiations supposedly went on for like 3 years, and they eventually agreed to barter Ricker Hill for the Alfred sawmill. And side note, part of what the Shakers say in their tour is part of the reason why this is the only active Shaker village is it was so supported by the guests of Poland Spring. So the first home they lived in was this. And those of you who know the property, this eventually became the mansion house. They kept adding on to it and adding on to it and adding on to it. By the time they finished, it had 66 hotel rooms, plus it had housing for 100 employees in dormitory-style buildings. This building was open year-round up until World War II. And so whenever you see pictures of Poland Spring with snow, this is the building you would typically see because the Poland Spring House was closed after Columbus Day. Is that your question?
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
So this is a photo of Hiram Ricker. He is considered the founder of Poland Spring Water. In 1834, he took over operating the Wentworth Ricker Inn, which later became the Mansion House, from his father. 10 years later, he was overseeing the work being done on the farm. He was on the edge of the property and drank from the spring. For most of his adult life, he suffered from dyspepsia, most commonly known as indigestion. He drank freely from the spring for several days, and miraculously, he became cured of his indigestion. So he began to think maybe there might be medicinal properties in the water. In 1800, his uncle was sick with a fever, deemed hopelessly ill. He also drank freely from the spring and went on to live another 52 years. So Hiram began to share the water with his friends and neighbors, and even a doctor in Portland started prescribing the water for curing ailments like liver and kidney disease.
That's their first.
Yep. So in 1859, the first commercial sale of water was made. The water was sold in demijohns, which were 3-gallon clay jugs that were sold for 15 cents each.
There's one up front.
This is a photo of the original source with an unidentified man at the source. This was the first, in 1860, the first of several wooden structures was built to cover and protect the spring. Water was not only barreled in demijohns, but barrels more suitable for long-distance shipping. This barreling house replaced the 1860 wooden structure. In 1883, they added a porch as it became a very popular attraction for the hotel guests. Allowing the public to view the bottling process was one of the foundations of the Rickers Water Enterprise and would continue as they expanded their operations. In the center of this photo is Hiram Ricker handing water to an unidentified person. In 1906 to 1907, they completed a new spring house and bottling plant. It was constructed with elements of Spanish architecture and Italian marble. Guests could enter the spring house and have a glass of water served to them directly from the original source. The Rickers went to great lengths to assure customers of the sanitary standards, and therefore there were shower stalls installed in this building, and all workers had to shower before entering the work floor. They had white lab uniforms and even clean white shoes that they had to wear during their shift that they couldn't go outside with. Home delivery became popular even in the early years. As bottles began to overtake barrel production, it became a common sight to see water being carried around town, even to Lewiston and Auburn, Portland, and the train station at Danville. Soon they had depot offices in New York, Philly, Chicago, Boston, and elsewhere. These were ordering and shipping centers for water in urban areas, and they also helped market the resort as a tourist destination. Soon the water companies, they started earning recognition, and in 1893 they won the prize at the Chicago World's Fair for having such medicinal properties in their water. They also won grand prize at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. These awards drove to international fame, leading to offices in London, Paris, Cairo, and Manila. More in demand than ever, Poland Spring water became the drink of choice on Pullman cars, transatlantic ships, and even Zeppelins. And people love checking out the spring, whether it be the average hotel guest or even President Taft, as shown here in 1912. So this is a brief genealogy of the Ricker family. For the remainder of the presentation, we'll be talking about the third and fourth generations of the Rickers here at Poland Spring. So this is Hiram Ricker's 6 children, and if they haven't switched seats on me since I've done this presentation, Alvin Bolster is on the left. He ran the back-of-house operations, the farming, kitchens, and purchasing goods for the resort. Sarah, or Miss Sadie, she ran the religious instruction and Sunday school program at Poland Spring. She was very instrumental in getting the All Souls Chapel built on the hill. In the center, Edward Payson, he ran the hotels and overall management of the company. Cynthia Ella, she was the only daughter who married, moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. Her involvement in the family business was limited, but she did return each summer to Poland Spring. Hiram Weston, he ran the water company side of the business. He was also very instrumental in tourism here in Maine. He helped start the Maine Automobile Association and the Maine Publicity Bureau, which is now the Maine Tourism Association. And lastly is Miss Nettie, Jeanette. She was an artist. She hand-painted menu covers at Poland Spring. She was also the director of the art gallery housed in the Maine State Building, and she was co-editor of the Hilltop Resort Weekly newsletter.
So with the popularity of the water, they needed more hotel rooms. The 66 rooms no longer was sufficient. And they needed really hotel rooms in the summer. So Hiram Weston, or, no, Hiram, the first one, he built the Poland Spring House. This is the first 100 rooms. It had a dining room, a music room, lobbies, and then 3 floors of hotel rooms. But soon they needed more rooms. 350 hotel rooms, in total 500 rooms. So, and it was very, my husband actually asked me to marry inside that building. When I came to Poland Spring, it was after the Job Corps, so everything was gone, but you could still see the wonderful architecture, the staircases, the grand staircases. I mean, it looks something like you see the pictures of the Titanic, because it was very Victorian in its era. And the music room, it had a nice big stage on it, and they could seat 500 people watching the Boston Pops would come up and play for it. Just amazing. This is a picture of the dining room.
Music room.
Music room, okay. Music room. That's probably way over there, yes. This is a picture of the music room. Yes, the kitchen. Every table had its own waitress. Doesn't that sound like heaven? You didn't know that, huh? Samoset? Yeah? Mount Kineo? And
Forest Hills Ricker Hotel in Augusta, Georgia. They would go down there in the winter and work in the off-season in Georgia. Ricker's.
Thank you. Am I doing golf?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, the Rickers really believed in recreation. There was tennis courts there. They grew, well, they found an area that was perfect picnicking. They had a beach house on Milrang. They had walkways everywhere. But the biggest game in the late 1900s was the game of golf. And no hotel had a golf course. So they hired, yeah, sure, Arthur Fenn, it came, Arthur Fenn from Connecticut. He was a pro, and they hired him to come up and develop a golf course at Poland Spring. They opened the golf course in 1896. The first tee was in front of the Poland Spring House, and the 9th hole was where the Maine State Building is now. So it wrapped around the top of the hill, not going all the way to the lake. And that was just wonderful, and it attracted some very famous early golfers, and hence part of the property, we now have the Golf Hall of Fame there. And in 1915, the Rickers decided they wanted to make an 18-hole golf course. And the number, what?
Advance your slides.
Okay. So Donald Ross. Donald Ross had, we are one of the very first golf courses that he built in the state of Maine. He eventually built 400 golf courses across the country, including Pinehurst #2. So very famous golfer. And then there was one more golfer involved with a lot of history, and that was Walter Travis. Walter Travis changed a little bit of the course to make it a little bit friendlier for the golfer, but it attracted all kinds of golfers. And here's a picture of President Harding on our links. And the reason it's called a links is a links-style course means that you start at the first tee and you don't come back to the clubhouse until the 18th tee. And you'll see that very few golf courses have that distinction, but most of Donald Ross's are that way. Some very famous people came to play at Poland Spring. This gentleman came to land on Poland Spring. The plan was that he was going to land at Poland Spring because his aunt and uncle were staying at the Poland Spring house and he wanted to visit them. But there was such a crowd waiting for him to arrive, there was no way he could land on the golf course. So he dropped a note. So we just have a copy of the note here. And they did a lot of championship golf tournaments at Poland Springs in those days. And you can, this is the 4th hole, and for those of you that have played Poland Spring, the tree line is still there, but the trees back here by the tee have all grown in, but they used to keep them very wide so that people could watch the play. And I don't remember which golfers that were, but you can see these people in funny outfits. Here, something else that we don't think about now is back in those days there was no golf carts. And these rich people really didn't want to carry their golf bags. So Poland Spring had a caddy cab from the beginning, and it ran until 1966. And so the kids would come from East Boston, South Boston, to come up for the summer at Poland Spring. They'd live in this building, and they would get $1 a bag for carrying a gentleman's bag for 18 holes, and the stronger ones would carry 2 bags. And they'd sit on the bellhop bench in front of the golf course and wait for somebody to pick them. But here's a picture. Gentleman right over here, David remembers probably, Charlie Connors. He was the manager of Poland Spring before I got there. Yeah, I bet you know that picture, don't you? Yeah. Babe, there's a story that he hit the longest drive at Poland Spring, and I would not be surprised with his swing. But he would always spend time with the caddies after they finished work. This is the beach house I was telling you about.
It's okay, yes.
Okay.
So, as Cindy said, this is the beach house. It started as a changing area for guests. It was more commonly known as the bathhouse back then. The upstairs had a social area on the top floor for men to play cards. It was originally built in the water on piers. In the 30s, it was set back onto land, and then in the 80s, it was transformed into a residential space, and it's still part of the resort today. We rent it out to guests in the summer. As Cindy said, recreation was very popular at the resort. They had tennis courts and lawn bowling. Competitive recreation was also very popular, and they had many single and doubles tournaments with tennis. And then the lawn bowling was also on the bent grass tennis courts, which are still there today. So the stables on the hill, the main stables were across the road from the mansion house. In 1887, the building was greatly expanded, and then it was destroyed by fire in 1894. They replaced it the following year, and it stood there until 1984, when another fire sadly took the building along with the Caddy Camp building, which stood nearby it. In 1913, the Rickers decided they needed to add a third building hotel on the property. The original purpose of the Rickers